Well, it's not anything that we're going to be able to eat. That's heating up. Just what I want. And while that's melting, I've got to take all this tape off so I can oil up all of the handles for winterizing, because the humidity increases dramatically here on the northwest coast of Tasmania during the winter. Now, what I've done, equal parts of this wool fat, lanolin, equal parts with this old wax waterproofing, and the beauty of the metric system is that 1 liter of water weighs 1 kilogram. So if you're trying to get equal amounts, it's really, really easy. All right, we have ignition. Oh, let's have that off. Right. Okay. Now that's melting. Now this is linseed oil. Use by date, November 99. Yeah, it's okay. I'm not going to drink it. Coagulating? Yeah. Let's try and get that up to about the same. A little bit short. Still a little bit. And in there. And since it was a little bit short, we'll give it just a little bit more. That'll do. We're not talking about precision now, are we? Now, flammable liquid. So we'll leave that till last. This might take a while to melt. So that'll give me plenty of time to remove the paper and tape from all of these handles. When is it a shovel and when is it a spade? They all have different uses, just like hammers. This is a beauty. This is from the Forestry Commission, and I use it for planting trees. That's a beauty. Very strong blade, because sometimes you're dealing with fairly rocky ground. And the paint is to try and protect it, because the high humidity in Tasmanian winters, things go rusty. And when you're out in the garden, things get wet, things get muddy. And how's the cooking? Cooking! It's lunchtime. Well, nourishing the wood. Yeah. Progress. Now, if you had a good tin to put it into with a lid, I'd recommend that. That's a little bit of old turps. But a glass container, because that way you could always heat it up a little bit. Uh-oh. We're getting a bit low on water. Ah, by the way, if you happen to have a fire, an oil fire, do not try and extinguish it with water, because it may go right up in your face. not a good idea. So what you do instead, you smother it. Try not to catch everything on fire. If it does, just throw another blanket over the top of it. Do not add water for an oil fire. It's probably one of the most dangerous things you could possibly do. Are all of these used for the same thing? No. Just like a hammer, you don't use a claw hammer for working with metal. Claw hammers are used with nails for building. Ball peen hammers are quite different. Come on, let's get that tape out of the way. While that wax is melting, gives me plenty of time to remove all this stupid tape. But that's going to make a much better winterized shovel. Now, how old is that? Oh, we're talking about maybe 40 years. I bought that one probably in 1980 when I moved down from New South Wales to Tasmania. Some of the first tools that I bought when I came down there. Why did I go zigzag? Because there's a rivet. There's a rivet there. When you get all the tape away, you can start to see their age. So I gave all of these a light sanding, so they're nice and smooth. Good hardwood handles. You don't want cheap pine handles. Spear and Jackson, good English company. They make really, really good hand tools. The one next to it, this one, Cyclone, an Australian company. Boral Cyclone Boral bought it out, and unfortunately, the quality I would not be able to say is the same. But the old Cyclone were really quite good. When you start getting all the paper and tape off, you can say a little bit more of the age, because when I'm sanding, I'm not getting down right into the little corners here. I'm more interested in where my hands are going to avoid splinters. Let's see, it's melting. And the Wicked Witch of the West, I'm melting! Yeah, okay. Oil, boil, toil and trouble, cold, yeah, okay. No, I'm not going to quote Shakespeare. I'll have to grab Macbeth and have another read. Come on. My hands are still showing the battle scars. The paint from yesterday. I didn't want to do all the painting and oiling all on the same day, and have the paint too soft. So I purposely left it overnight. And it seems to be quite good. This is a relatively new boreal cyclone. Somebody had been using it, probably concrete or whatever, and they kept banging it on the wheelbarrow because all across the back here, it's really scarred up. So they'd go bang, bang on the edge of the wheelbarrow, time and time again. Whoops, linseed oil, get that out of the way. Now this is another one. This is an old Spear and Jackson. I've had that one for a long, long time. Let's see how the wax is coming along. It's getting there. You really don't want to do this in the kitchen and risk a spill. You really don't want to do this where there's a risk of a fire. So if I have a fire out here, the worst that's going to happen is that this old flat tray truck utility catches on fire. Yeah, okay. It's got over 1 million kilometers on this thing. I bought it when it had around 900,000. An old diesel flat tray Toyota. The preferred implement of insurgents around the world. Mount a 50 caliber machine gun on the top of it. Bingo! Off across the desert we go. Okay, that's making progress. Gives me enough time to finish these. And then I start the oiling. Now this is another implement that I've had for ages and ages, and it is my favorite for the garden. Made by a German company called Wolf. Unfortunately, I've been pretty hard on the handle, so I had to reinforce the handle with a bit of aluminium tubing. It's even cracked up in here, but still does the job really well. Because then you can cut this way to cut off the roots that don't get dug out this way when you're weeding. This one's referred to as a pelican pick, used by the Hydro, which is the Electricity Commission here in Tasmania, and other government agencies. They're really, really good. Great thing for a trench. If you're doing any electrical conduit, plumbing, you dig this way, then this way to scoop out the bottom of the trench. And you can do it this way to scrape off the surface. Really, really good. That one's been reinforced because the tip was starting to wear out a bit. And that comes from rocky ground. How many people even know what this thing is? This is a hay fork. And because it was red, I thought, yeah, okay. I'll touch it up with a bit of red paint. Now, the replacement handle cost me about $45. This is an old hand-forged fork. That is not something you'd buy in a shop. And this is a wicked beast. This is used slashing blackberries. I sit back and I file that off, give it a nice edge. I cut that into it so I can take it and go in underneath the rootstock of things like blackberries. We're almost ready. All right, I'm going to put the terps in now. This is where it gets a little bit more volatile, so I might even turn the heat off just to minimize the risk of a fire. Now we'll leave it. Cover that back up. Keep it away from the heat. From open flames. Yep. Rightio. Why is it drinking that smells like this? I don't know. Our sense of taste and our sense of smell are so closely linked together. It's really, really amazing. I think we'll leave that. And that's just going to soak in beautifully. Now it's going to be too thick. It's cooling off. And you can tell that a fair bit of it's going to sit on the surface. So what do? Now that the flame's turned off, ta-da! We want it more liquid. I'm wondering if I could run the risk of moving this thing without spilling it. What I should do it's hot, but not too terrible. Get all this out of the way. That's hot too. That's better. Now, you can see how it's sitting on the surface. I want just a little bit more liquid so it soaks in. Let's see how that does. I think it's still going to sit on the surface. Yep. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pour it in there. And add another extra bit of terps. There's wax in the bottom that hasn't gone into the melt, but that doesn't matter. Let's find out. Don't forget the hand grip. I'm going to rub all these down with a rag. Now, trying to get it in there will prevent water buildup in there, and it will rot. And also, if you can get any oil down into there. Unfortunately, you forget it out in the garden, water gets in there, and it rots. This handle, you can see how it's deteriorated over the last 40 years or so. But whenever I think of it, comes a little bit of oil. And work it into the grain. This is a difficult one, trying to get it in there, so eventually the handle's just going to snap when I'm digging into something that's fairly difficult. And then I just do what I normally do, replace the handle. Now that can go last. Yeah, I'm really happy with this mix. Try and get it right in there. Winterizing. It doesn't seem like it's much at this time of the year when everything's nice and mild and sunny on these beautiful autumn days. But there's going to be plenty of cold, wet, rainy days through the winter. And if you happen to have a drain that blocks up, if you happen to have a wet spot when you need to dig a little bit of a trench, there's Gus. Then having these things cleaned up, and besides, when it does get wet and muddy, it's really easy to wash the mud off if these garden tool handles have been waterproofed. Get it right in there. If I swap a little bit of it around, doesn't matter. I'm going to rub them all down with a oily rag. Yep. Try and get it right in the grain. The nice thing is, with the sun hitting it at that angle, I can see quite clearly the spots that I've missed where it hasn't gone into the grain of the wood. I'm not sure if the camera's picking that up. And this piece of cardboard, now being soaked with wax, is going to be a really, really good fire starter. A winter bonfire. So when is a shovel and when is a shovel a spade? These are shovels. That can be called a spade, this one. But depending upon the region or where you're growing up, those terms become rather interchangeable. Swap a bit. You can really see the grain in this one. Nice Australian eucalypt hardwood. And believe me, something that's aged like this, 40 years of weathering, it is very hard wood. I would even question whether hickory and oak would be as hard as these things. I learned a long time ago up in central New South Wales, that dry seasoned eucalypt, you don't just grab it and try and put a nail through it. It's not going to work. You need to drill each and every one of them. Now, leaving these in the sun for a little bit before I give them a rub down. There's a spot that I missed. Then they're going to come out looking really good. It's going to soak right in. Now, this one actually did fall off the back of a truck. Friend picked it up on the side of the road. So, here, you can use this. He's got a little unit in town. He doesn't do very much digging. His backyard is dominated by a converted aviary for orchids. And the few garden beds that he has have liliums in them. And he just uses a garden fork. It's been dug over so many times that you really don't need to do the serious digging. Now the butt end of the handle, where your hand is often resting, if it's sharp and splintery, it's not going to be a lot of fun. So giving that a little bit extra attention with the sandpaper. Also, up here, where your other hand is, these things are old. I use them for my potting mix. I use them when I'm cleaning out my wood heater. And eventually the handle's going to go, and then I'll have to find somebody with a wood lathe so I can make up a replacement. But in the meantime, I just keep giving them light sand. Oil them up when I think of it, which I must admit isn't as often as something that is my favorite garden tool. These two. And you can see how smooth and shiny that handle is. It gets used often. And because it gets used often, it gets rubbed down, cleaned often, it gets oiled often, probably more so than any other garden tool that I have. The secateurs don't have wooden handles, so they just get wiped and oiled. But this handle is probably 40 years. The same age as the big shovel, but used so much more often. Yeah, that's going to be good. That will do it for another winter. Another 6 months to a year. Yep. And so this is what I do next. And I'm happy with that. Now, how does that look? That is going to be just fine. My nose is running, sorry. Yeah, this is going to be just fine. Oh, I like it. And this old thing, I got it secondhand back in the early 80s. So how old it is, I have no idea. I would say probably 45 years. It's getting a bit sticky, so I'm going to have to turn the rag. Yep. And you can always add a little bit of terps to the rag, just to give it a bit of a rub down. Like so. Very sticky. That's better. Yeah, I like it. Well, that's it. Winterizing your garden tools. That's it. Wayne's Weird World. It's going to take me a while. I've got to finish all this mess. See you next time.